Hello and welcome to the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast. I'm your host, Rosa Hart, and today I am joined by another nurse leader, Dr. Rhonda Finnie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation today.
Yeah, me too. So you are the president-elect for the ANVC, and we were introduced by a mutual nurse leader connection, Carrie Moore. So could you tell us a little bit about what the ANVC is, and then also more about your background in healthcare and things like that?
Yeah, ANVC is the Association for Neurovascular Clinicians, and the ANVC formed in 2010. There were graduates from the Advanced Practice Fellowship and through NetSmart. And they thought that we needed an organization that was stroke specific, that really did focus on the education that nurses and nurse practitioners and PAs, advanced practice providers, really needed in order to really be evidence-based in care. And if you remember that all of this predates, the thrombectomy trials and all of that, we've seen a lot of changes in stroke care, which has made an association that really focuses on that aspect of neuroscience practice really important in terms of reducing death and disability, particularly from stroke. Um, and so trying to create avenues and education for evidence base in our practice has really been a focus and is actually the mission of ANVC. And so I'm really happy to have been a part of that since 2017. I became aware of ANVC at the International Stroke Conference. And so that's how I became aware of them. And then shortly afterwards, was elected to the board and ultimately elected to be president elect. So I'm
Yeah.
very thrilled about this organization.
Yeah, and you got your start in neuro through a very personal
I
path
did.
that, would you care to share with us
Yeah.
your what brought you into nursing?
Um, I I had not anticipated I would be a nurse. That was never what I thought my calling was. I have a degree in economics, as a matter of fact, and so my plan was to go to the Fed. I was, going to be Alan Greenspan's right hand person. He didn't know that, but but that's where I was headed. I was headed toward monetary policy and that kind of thing, and I got married and had children, and having children changes priorities because you become very aware that healthcare, childcare, education, all of those things are vitally important, not only for your family but for society at large. And so it just sort of changes your perspective. But my youngest child was diagnosed with a brain tumor when he was 2. And we had wonderful care. I mean, wonderful care at Arkansas Children's Hospital. The nurses, the specialty nurses in particular, I really became close to, and they became friends. And so shortly after that, I went to nursing school and graduated with my BSN at Harding University in Searcy, Arkansas. And I didn't anticipate that I was going to work in neuroscience. I didn't anticipate I was going to work for stroke. I was in CV and working in a different organization, and it was one of those things where 5 minutes would have made a difference in the trajectory of my life.
Mm,
And
wow.
the nurse that we had became so close to, her name is Sharon. She was coming out of a restaurant. I was going into a restaurant. And she said, I need a nurse to take care of this new physician that's coming into our practice. And so that's how I really got back involved into neuroscience. It wasn't something I was looking for, but it was one of those moments where 5 minutes would have made a world of difference in terms of where you would be today.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
and I love the tie-in with restaurants because I do a lot with, like, local restaurants, and there's so much overlap because, like, food is a huge unifier. But you're right, you never know who you're going to run into when you're just out and about in the community, so that's amazing. And did you say that you were working with the neurosurgeon who treated your son
Yes.
as
So
well?
that so m my the neurosurgeon who had treated my he was actually a first-year resident, and
Oh,
we absolutely we loved him. I mean, we just thought the world of him, and so I when I went to interview with him, my background to that point had been in cardiovascular.
uh-huh,
And he said, "You know, Rhonda," he said, "I know that you have a personal experience with neurosurgery and taking care a child that is ill and is really sort of in a terminal situation." He said, "But I just am concerned that you don't have neurosurgery experience that I would need." And I said, I said, "That's true." I said, "But your patients are not just neurosurgery patients." And at this time, it's really going toward the adult population. I said, "Your patients
uh-huh.
have hypertension, they have diabetes, they have, cholesterol, maybe they have a history of skin infections that might impact your surgical postoperative course." And I said, "So your patients have a lot more going on than just what your focus is in neurosurgery. And I know about those things." And he said, "I didn't even think about that." So when you're faced in a situation where people want to pin you down into
Mhm.
one sort of pathway, you bring a lot more to the table than what they're trying to pin you down to do. And so it's really important to highlight those things. Now, that's true, but I have this experience and I have that experience and to really highlight the things you do have rather than the things you don't have.
Yeah. And that's so important for nurses to bring
Yes.
in that we have this whole comprehensive, holistic assessment that
Mhm.
we bring for our patient care because, specialists may come and go, but at least like when we're caring for them at the bedside, we're there for all of it and responsible for all of it and the implementation of it. So, way to go advocating for yourself. And you're like, I know what I bring to the table. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, and really, we all, all of us are in healthcare. We come to nursing. Most of us have a story behind that. Most of it is not really accidental. We may have been exposed to that, but we bring all of that to the table. So don't forget that when you're talking to people and trying to advocate for yourself.
right, exactly. And you have a motto that I
That's right
was
behind
so
me.
delighted. Well, there you go. Tell us your motto for anyone who's listening and can't see.
So I read a book by Joe Ty, and it's called The Florence Prescription: From Accountability to Ownership. And what's really special about this particular book, it's sort of in an allegory, like if Florence Nightingale had come to mentor you, what would she say to you? How would she advise you? Things like that. And so as I was reading this book, it became very clear to me that maybe we're focusing on the wrong thing in our profession. Accountability is similar to when you rent a car and you bring it back with a gas tank full. That's being accountable for doing what you said you were going to do. But when you own the car, you change the oil, you change the wipers, you rotate the tires. If you need new tires, you put new tires on them. You wash your car, you vacuum it out, you really take care of it. And really, what we need in our profession is not accountability. We need to own it. We
Mhm,
need to own the profession and invest in ourselves enough to realize that the organization cannot invest in you the way that you would invest in you. And so, whether
mm,
that's in education, whether that is in really becoming an expert in your specialty, whatever that might be, and then seeking out resources that will allow you to sort of elevate your practice, we really want ownership. And so one of the ways that you can do that is this idea of proceed until apprehended. In other words, keep going until they literally take you down in the hallway. Keep going because no one, when you're trying to improve yourself, and you're trying to, not just as a person, you can certainly do that personally, but professionally, that comes through in the work that you do. It comes through in the relationships you have. It comes through in the leadership that you provide on your unit, or in any, really, you can use that in any way of life. But if you see a problem, seek to solve the problem. And so the motto is proceed until apprehended. And so one of my friends, Lindsay Bourne, actually made this for me for Christmas.
Aw, that's great.
So it's on my wall, obviously.
I love it that you say it enough that she knew to make that for you.
I
So,
I
it
must
wasn't
have.
something.
I didn't realize that I did, but I must have. She said, "Rhonda, this is for you."
Maybe she just interpreted it from your actions,
Maybe. Yeah, maybe
which
she
is
is one that
super
also
important.
has modeled that. So I'm so
Oh,
fortunate to work with people who've modeled that as well. So I'm not the Lone Ranger. I may have been the first, but now I'm not the Lone Ranger. You have to have partners with you. It's sort of like the Lucy and Ethel show. You have to have a partner that can sort of not only keep you accountable but help you own it.
mhm, and they believe in you so hard, they won't tolerate you putting yourself down.
Oh, no, no, and vice versa. I think, it's sort of like Michelle Obama's kitchen table. If you've ever seen her on Netflix, she talks about the people at her kitchen table, and these are people who keep her grounded. These are people who keep her real. These are people who keep her not only accountable, but owning herself
Yeah,
and her life. And so, at the workplace, you have to have people like that too. So it may not be the person on the unit with you. It may be a person on a different unit or whatever. But making sure and keeping a team around you that encourages you, motivates you, inspires you, and I think that's really important to prevent burnout.
mhm, and we have to be intentional about those relationships because they do not nurture themselves. As you mentioned,
Mhm.
you may not be working with the people anymore who can be the most encouraging, so you may need to take a detour in order to have those encouraging conversations and pour into each other.
Exactly. Yeah, and at one of our on the neuro team, we have a morning huddle, and I think that helps keep everybody together. But we also like each other, so getting together after work some days is fun. But I do think that being very intentional about the relationships are really important, and really enjoying each other. And that takes work to get the team right. Anybody who has had team members leave and have to sort of incorporate new team members understands what that's like. But building a team you're right, is very intentional.
Yeah, things kinda just s unravel if you leave them alone. You
Yes.
gotta keep tightening up things. So tell us some more about, your experience. You've had a lot of, accomplishments that you've done, so can
Um,
you, give us some
yeah.
of that so that we can hear, like, what is even possible?
And I've mentioned this to you before. I've actually had this conversation with some of the nurse practitioner students, and I had a lunch and learn with them recently for Arkansas State, and that and one of the things that is really important is to be a part of your professional organization, because it gives you such mentoring possibilities. I would not be where I am today if I did not join my state nurses association and I was mentored by people who they may not have been nurse practitioners, they may be in a totally different specialty, but the leadership and the mentorship was always there. And so I was mentored by a lot of people who were very well respected in the state. They were well known in the state. And just watching them sort of maneuver politically. I'm not an overtly political person, um, but I do think that there are times when you have to stand up for your practice, and you have to stand up for what you think is right in your state, and just in general. So being able to have that modeled for you is really important. But the only way that you can do that is if you get outside yourself and get outside your organization and really be a part of your nurse organizations. But I've I think one of my most fond, or I guess my fondest um, uh, award would be the alumni awards that I've gotten from my universities. I've gotten the alumni awards from Harding University and then from the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. And so that was really quite rewarding when you are honored by your colleagues and by people who may not necessarily work with you on a daily basis, but somebody writes a letter, they nominate you, and it must have been impressive enough where people thought that maybe you deserved this award. and
Well, yeah, that's
and so I think that's very special. I was the State Excellence Award winner for AANP. That was also a very much an honor, again, from your colleagues. And I think those are the awards that are really the most significant, are the ones that come from your colleagues, because um, I know what the I know what advanced practice does in my state. I know what the nurses do in my state, and that award, frankly, could have gone to anybody. And so anyway, so it's very nice to have that recognition, but it's also nice for us to be able to nominate other people for that recognition as well. And so I've been privileged to be able to nominate people for other awards as well to recognize their efforts.
yeah, and I think that's something we don't always think of.
Yeah,
Sometimes nurses can feel like we're competing against each other, especially in niche areas, which, I mean, in stroke, there is enough stroke to go around. So I think we can focus on collaboration over competition, and really other people outside of our niche are not going to understand the implications of
yeah.
the work that we're doing. So if you see somebody and you're like, oh my goodness, that work they're doing deserves an award, nominate them. Like,
There's
because
so many
otherwise people are not going
opportunities.
to know the story.
Exactly,
Yeah.
there's so many opportunities to do that. ANVC, we have the Stroke Clinician of the Year award, and that's open until July 31, I believe. But just taking the time to make a nomination is really important. But it also allows you to practice appreciating. And I know that I could do better at that, but I think we all could do better
Yeah.
at showing appreciation for our stroke colleagues and really the work that they do.
Well, and even like our Kentucky Nurses Association has several awards that will be given out
Mhm.
at their annual meeting and gala in November. And if you're a nurse in Kentucky, you go ahead and nominate
Mhm.
somebody you know. And not all of those are for nurses, like some are like volunteerism, just like the American Heart Association has. Volunteerism, or I think it's like Stroke Star Awards or
Mhm.
something. So there's lots of opportunities. So even if you're not in, certain organization, there are more broader general ones as
Exactly.
well that can be really great to encourage our colleagues, I think, because, with all of the burnout and discouragement that's going around, we have to be intentional about encouraging each other, um, because who understands it better than another nurse?
That's
What
tr
how much you're giving.
That is so true, and honestly, I think that certainly I there are a lot of opportunities that we probably have all missed in that, but I think being very intentional about doing that is really important for team building. And we are fortunate we have a leader that just continually does that and models that behavior. So um, very
Aw.
happy to have that kind of leadership on our team.
Who are you thinking of right now? You wanna give them a
Yeah,
shout out?
yeah, Sharon O'Reilly. Sharon O'Reilly is our
Oh,
neuro program line manager. She is a clinical nurse leader, and so she has really brought our program, really made our program very, very strong. And so, anyway, she's done a great job.
Aw, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the question I ask every guest on the Nurse Rosa's Insights podcast. And that is, Rhonda, if you were given a grant for $1 billion to meet the needs that you see in healthcare, how would you like to see it used strategically to have the most sustainable impact?
I think that in order for it to be sustainable, you almost have to endow it. So you have to make sure that you create a pool of money that continues to produce money. And so I think endowments are a good way to do that. And there are many organizations that do that, but endowments are a good way to do that. But I think focusing on education, focusing on stroke certification in particular, focusing on education related to leadership, and really putting some of our stroke leadership in nursing programs so that when they come out, they are more ready and they are more excited about neuroscience. I don't know about you, but everybody wants to go into cardiology. And I'm okay with that. But I think that creating some curriculum opportunities through academic practice partnerships are really could really help us in helping increase the amount of nurses who really want to go into neuroscience. It's exciting. You know, nothing is the same. There are a lot of different roles you can do. But I do think that if I had $1 billion, I would want to make sure it's sustainable. And the one way to do that is through endowment.
That's amazing. Have you been a part of creating any endowments,
So no,
like a coalition or
No,
anything?
but I would no, but I would love to do that. It is one of the way it is the only way that I know of to make sure it's sustainable. Well, I say no. We were part of the Arkansas Community Foundation when
Okay.
I was on the board of Arkansas Nurses Association, and that created an endowment. So you spend the interest, but the principal is still there. So you create some sustainability
Yeah.
in your investment. So you don't just blow it all in the first year. But
Mhm.
you need $1 billion to be able to do it.
Yeah, right.
You need
To
money
be
to be
able
able to really sustain it. It doesn't have to be a billion, but you need a substantial amount of money to be able to sustain it. So, but I do think that that's one way we do that. And then we help educate nurses that they can actually recognize an opportunity that they can actually apply for a resource themselves. I think that's one of the
mm,
things that we don't teach enough, and one of the things we don't practice enough, quite frankly. And so, nurse leaders who are really doing that, we really need to look to them as models for how to do that.
yeah. And I think we need to get better at messaging about opportunities, like
Mhm.
scholarship opportunities for educational conferences and things like that. One time I went to a neuro conference and I got the AMWF
Yeah, yeah.
scholarship, which covered the cost of
Mhm.
the um, not tuition, but
The registration. Yeah,
registration.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
That word. And so that was great because I was able to
Mhm,
attend that year.
mhm.
And after that, I learned about submitting abstracts and becoming a speaker and presenting posters and things like that helps
Yeah.
to get to participate in a lot of conferences. But at the International Stroke Conference this year, which you mentioned, ISC
Mhm,
was pivotal for your career
mhm.
because you met Anne Alexandroff
Yeah,
there,
I
changed your
did.
life.
Yeah.
And definitely changed my life too,
Mhm.
because the Stronger After Stroke podcast won first place at the Quality Awards,
Oh, nice.
and, like, this whole
Yeah.
spiral of podcast thing really happened. But what I was gonna say about the International Stroke Conference this year is they had a scholarship for nurses to attend, and they had 0 applicants
Oh,
because
wow.
nobody knew to apply.
Oh, wow.
And they were like, "How do we let people know?" I'm like, "Well, like, did you try?"
Yeah, yeah,
Because apparently nobody knew to apply.
yeah,
So if there's something that you wanna do, you can always just, like, ask,
yeah.
maybe the person in charge didn't put it on the website. You know, so if there's a conference you wanna go to and you're like, "I'm really interested in learning more about that," and you don't see a scholarship opportunity on their website, call the organizers and
Mhm.
maybe there's one they forgot to announce.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and, it never hurts to ask.
Exactly, and they might be able to suggest other things,
Mhm,
right? Like,
mhm.
if you submit a poster or if you,
Yeah,
are willing to speak and things like that. They're always looking for speakers, that might give people night terrors thinking about it. But it's an option,
yeah,
and,
absolutely.
I really like to encourage other nurses to recognize their own
Mhm.
expertise. Not everybody has as many letters after their name as you
But,
do,
you
Rhonda,
don't need them. You don't need them. You don't.
'cause you've had expertise from your practice.
Absolutely. I was doing this before I had all those letters. I mean, I was doing things
Mhm,
before I had the letters. You don't have to have them.
mhm,
You need to do 3 things. You need to show up, you need to speak up, and you need to stand up.
mm,
That's what you need to do.
and proceed until
Proceed
apprehended.
until apprehended.
That is a powerful motto. You might start a movement now.
I I hope well, I you might start a movement.
Uh, we'll do it
There you
together.
go. I'd be happy
Collaborate.
to.
Yeah. Well, if there's someone listening to this podcast and they wanna reach out to collaborate with you on
Yeah,
something,
yeah.
is LinkedIn the best way to find you?
Yes, yes. So Rhonda Finnie,
Oh,
Finnie.
mhm, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. And then if you have enjoyed this podcast and you want to hear more from Nurse Rosa's insights, obviously it's not just me being insightful, but getting to talk to other really insightful people. Um, Please like and subscribe wherever you're listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment if you learned something, or if you know of another visionary leader who needs to get their voice amplified because they've got great things to say, because they have a great idea for $1 billion answer to the question of saving healthcare. And I will see you in the next episode.